Welcome back to another episode of the Aquademia podcast. I'm your host, Justin Grant.
And I'm Maddie Cassidy. And today we have a different formatted episode for you guys. And after doing a listener survey last year, you asked, this is us answering. You said that you would be interested in learning more about what Global Seafood Alliance does as an organization. So Justin and I thought that it would be a great idea to hear a little bit more from our internal department here at GSA, which is called the Program Integrity Department, and the different improvements in integrity and projects that that department has been working on. So we have 3 different members from our Program Integrity Department who are coming on one by one to give us a little snapshot of projects that they've been working on recently. And those projects are our new Seafood Processing Standard, SPS 6.0, our auditor training platform and work stream, and also the work that GSA has been doing in the human rights area. So before we get into all of that, if you enjoy this episode, be sure to leave us a rating or review on whichever podcast platform you listen to us on.
And if you're not already, follow us on X at Aquademia Pod. If you want to contact the podcast for any reason, you can do so by filling out our online form located at globalseafood.org/podcast.
All right, and we'll talk to you at the end.
Welcome to the Aquademia podcast.
Our diet is hurting the environment in myriad ways. I mean, we desperately need to eat more seafood.
This is a pioneering industry with a whole lot of people who have really good ideas and a lot of experience and are unafraid.
Aquademia is your go-to podcast for a fresh take on all things seafood.
Kyle, welcome back to Aquademia. It's been roughly 2 years since the last time you were on to talk about aquaponics, but we are not talking about aquaponics.
Yeah, we're
today.
talking about something very different.
Something
from
that both
aquaponics.
You and I know more than we should about auditor training. Before we get into GSA's auditor training and the courses that go with that, I want you to introduce yourself again to our audience who might not know who you are.
Absolutely. My name is Kyle Harrison. I work in the Program Integrity Department here at GSA as a governance and training specialist. A big part of my role here is to facilitate our auditor training program through instructional design and implementation. I'm responsible for registering candidates for our trainings, ensuring course fees are paid, and checking for homework completion. During the classroom sessions, I moderate the chat, as well as keep us on time while managing polls and quizzes to keep the audience engaged.
Love it.
That's like a modest way of putting what you do. Like the amount of effort and time and commitment that you have to your work, and our listeners will learn about that commitment as we walk through this episode, because the auditor training that I knew from 6 years ago looks nothing like it does now. And that is a huge part to what you have been doing with this.
It's no small feat.
Right.
So for our listeners that might not even know that we have auditor training, or maybe they don't even know what an auditor is.
Right.
Could you give us a brief overview of what is auditor training? Why do we have it? That sort of thing.
For sure. Auditor training here at GSA is to essentially teach auditors to go out and audit certified facilities to our own standards. It's an ongoing process that I've had the opportunity to improve upon as I joined the company a few years ago. Mm-hmm. It starts by reviewing applications, reading resumes, and screening those candidates. Once an auditor is accepted into the program, they complete a self-guided course as homework prior to the start of the virtual classroom sessions. We host our classroom sessions in online meetings, and the same goes for the proctored exam sessions. After passing their exams, I generate and distribute their completion certificates.
Why is the auditor training important to GSA?
The training program we host is essential to our organization's mission. Our auditors are not only assessing conformity to our standards, but are also ambassadors of GSA in a sense. They're the face of the annual audit that our certified facilities get to know firsthand. Mm-hmm. Since the auditor interaction is a critical point in the certification process for facilities, this makes it all the more important to deliver a fair and consistent experience. Precise calibration is key when it comes to training our third-party representatives.
Yeah, that's a really great point of we have over 4,000 certified facilities around the world, and their in-person experience with us as a company is actually through these third-party auditors. So it's really important that they understand what we stand for as an organization, like what our expectations are and that sort of thing. So it's really essential that that auditor training helps auditors feel comfortable with kind of representing us out in the world.
So moving on, Kyle, let's talk about the team's approach to tackling this auditor training. Who is involved across which departments, and how did this kind of collaboration unfold?
So our approach to these things has changed drastically over the past 5 or 6 years. Originally, it was an on-site training in different locations across the globe. Mm-hmm. Of course, the global pandemic changed things, and we made a shift to fully virtual courses with close collaboration between our program integrity department and the education department here at GSA. Online courses, however, come with their own set of challenges that have pushed us to adapt and make changes to accommodate the virtual world of continued education.
Right. I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on the show, but when Kyle's referring to the education department, at one point that was 2 people, myself and Sean, who our listeners or avid listeners should know because he was the originator of Aquademia podcast. The first time I attended the auditor training was in Dublin in Ireland. So we had, at the time, it was called the Gold Conference, and it was in Dublin. In 2017. A good percentage of staff were invited to attend that event. The auditor training kind of coincided. It was in the same location, but it was in the same building, but it is separate from where the conference was taking place. But that was the first time I got to see one of these strategically located auditor trainings. And the objective was to take a ton of notes and see how we can do better with the auditor training. I think at the time it might have been a 5-day course.
Oh my gosh. With
a lot of content. But to bring this back to what we're talking about, the auditor training was regionally located in different parts of the world, at least once, if not more than once a year. It contained how many rough slides do we think?
Actually, we started from that 5-day training. 4 days of that was course instruction, and 1 day
was
the last day. Exams, yep. And that was over 1,000 slides.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
That is crazy. So in that process of the 5-day long training, how did it come to be where we are today with auditor training?
Well, coming from a week-long endeavor, we received feedback that this was rather overwhelming, to say the least, especially for sitting in a virtual meeting for 8 hours a day, all week. By adding self-guided homework courses, we've been able to reduce the overall duration of our course to 2 days of classroom instruction and 1 day for exams. So that cut the course in half, essentially.
Mm.
Yeah, we were, from an instructional designer point of view, where is there clear areas of improvement? And I think it's looking at auditor duration time. It was how long the course was actually taking place, which directly affects cost, right? There's travel costs. So, hey, the auditor training is coming to your region. I'm using air quotes. No one can see that because I'm talking on a mic. So you had to travel. You had to spend a lot more time. That's hotels, that's food, that's all those costs. Our objective was to save auditors money and save auditors time, yet still walk away with our auditors being fully prepared to do their jobs.
So with that transition of going from a 5-day long course to what it is today of 2 days virtually in the classroom, a virtual classroom, and 1 day of exams. What sort of challenges have you had to overcome along the way? Because that is a huge transition of going from 1,000 slides, 5 days, to however many slides it is today. What is it, like 400?
Yep, it's a bit over 400.
Right. So that's a huge transition. So what sort of things have you had to overcome along the way to getting where you are now?
Well, adapting that content into a self-guided study was certainly one of the largest challenges when it came to cutting down the course duration and intensity. We had to develop a lot of interactive content in addition to the slides, because just reading slides is not going to teach people anything. You need to get people engaged. So
Right.
to engage people, we developed all sorts of interactive content, whether it was quizzes, drag and drop, slides, fill in the blank, all sorts of fun little activities to get people to engage with the platform being the GSA training platform.
Right. So what's the impact that you're seeing so far?
Well, since the major rehaul of our trainings, we've received a lot of positive feedback from attendees in regard to the initial challenges. We collect this feedback by sending out a post-course survey, which, by the numbers, has consistently shown overall ratings of 4.5 out of 5 stars for our course.
Wow, nice. That's fantastic.
The majority of participants also said the pace is perfect. However, of course, there are some who say it's a bit too fast. We do our best to slow down with consideration given to the fact that most of our auditors are English second language learners.
Right.
So some of our long-term auditors have also expressed interest in bringing back the in-person trainings, which would be great. But as you mentioned, with the cost of travel and other logistics, on-site training is no longer realistic without significantly increasing training fees by thousands of dollars.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot to ask of auditors to most likely fly somewhere and then pay for a hotel and food. It's a lot.
You try to find creative ways to mimic that in-person feel and that collaboration as best you can in the virtual setting. And I think that what Kyle has done recently over the last year and a half is really trying to find that balance. And it's not easy, and it will never be perfect. But I think the pros in this case are significantly outweighing those cons.
So now that this overhaul is really complete at this point, of course, this is always an iterative process. Things are always changing, and you're being innovative with new ideas and solutions for things that come up from feedback from auditors. But what is the next step for auditor training, and how can our listeners get involved if they're interested?
Well, as you mentioned, each time we conduct a training session, we learn a bit more about how to deliver the best teaching methods in an online learning environment while keeping attendees engaged. And the greatest influence for that comes directly from attendee feedback, which leads to improvements after every session. If there are any auditors listening, we are happy to review applications for our courses, which can be submitted to training@globalseafood.org. And of course, be sure to check out the Auditor Competency and Course Approval Requirements document posted on the Program Integrity Library at bapcertification.org. If you have any questions about the training program, feel free to contact that same email. I'll get back to you. And I'm happy to explain more in depth about how to become a BAP-approved auditor.
Kyle, I think we definitely did a great job with the bird's eye view of the auditor training. We could have spent a whole entire hour episode dissecting the importance of why this is a third-party audit. GSA is not going out and auditing our facilities, right? There's a huge conflict of interest there. So anyone that wants to learn more, we're going to have a bunch of useful links in the show notes. And again, if there's any specific questions that Kyle or program integrity can answer, just reach out and follow those links. Kyle, we really, really appreciate your time and your expertise, but also the hard work that you've been doing over the years to get the auditor training where it is. It's greatly appreciated. And thank you for your time here today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
Great to have you, Kyle.
Amy, thank you so much for joining Maddie and I on the Aquademia podcast. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Doing great.
Good. It's great to have you on the podcast. We're excited to have you on an episode for the first time.
Thanks for having me.
So, per our intro, the audience is expecting us to go not into great detail, but we really want to focus on this amazing human rights work that you're currently involved with. But before we get into that, could you please, for our audience, just introduce yourself and your role here at GSA?
Yeah, I'm Amy McGann, and I'm the Director of Social Responsibility.
So before we get a little more into the weeds, could you give our listeners, who some of them maybe don't have a huge depth of knowledge on human rights, could you give our listeners a brief overview of the human rights work that you're leading right now?
Yeah, so at GSA, we work on largely labor rights, and one thing that we are working on is to figure out how we can go beyond audits. Historically, we've focused on working to advance labor rights in the sector through our social responsibility pillar. So we're looking at how we can go beyond audits to help better understand what's happening on the ground and to advance respect for labor rights in the sector. So, of course, as I say that, we know that independent, democratically elected, transparent trade unions that are able to collectively bargain are the best way to ensure that labor rights are being respected at a particular facility, and the best way to have like a full understanding of what's happening on the ground. But there are a lot of reasons why that's not possible for a lot of workers. Sometimes it's illegal in some countries or for some types of workers. And there's tons of very good work being done by unions and NGOs on that topic. So what we're really asking is, when there isn't freedom of association, what could we be doing to fill in the gaps? And so through a series of convenings that we've had with retailers, NGOs, audit firms, and producers, we've landed on 2 work streams where we and they think that GSA could make a difference. So the first work stream is around data, and we're looking to identify, collect, and analyze additional data sources so we get data from our audits. But then we're looking to develop social KPIs and also conduct anonymous worker surveys to have additional data sources. And then we're also looking to develop a mechanism for retailers to be able to share learnings and, as appropriate, collaborate on efforts to advance labor rights.
That is a huge undertaking. That is a lot of people to organize, concepts to follow up on. So that's a lot of work. So I'm excited to kind of dig in a little deeper.
So you touched on this a little bit, but maybe if we can go into a little bit more detail on what really the issues or opportunities were that's kind of sparked this work, and why is it specifically important to GSA or the seafood industry at large?
Yeah, so at GSA, in terms of social responsibility, we want to be making concrete improvements in working conditions. And as I mentioned, the tool that we've historically used is the social responsibility pillar of our certification standards. And through social audits, a number of issues are identified, and then through our program, the facility has to correct those issues before they can get certified. And we are constantly looking to see how we can improve the requirements within our standards, and then also how those requirements are audited. But it's becoming more and more apparent that there are just certain limitations to social audits, and some issues are going to get missed. That's just a social auditor is only on the ground for a few days, and they often don't know the workers, and the workers haven't built up trust with them yet.
Right.
So, and this is, just to be clear, not a seafood specific issue or not a GSA specific issue. Any social audit has these limitations. And so we, since our goal is to make real concrete improvements to working conditions, we wanted to figure out, given these limitations, what else could we be doing to provide better assurance that labor rights are being respected at a particular facility?
With this massive process of trying to fill in these gaps that have been identified, what has been the team's approach to tackling this problem? I know you mentioned that there's a lot of work streams going on with retailers and NGOs. So what has that looked like for this project?
So we started really thinking through this last year during a convening that we co-hosted with the Consumer Goods Forum. We invited retailers, producers, NGOs, and audit firms, and sort of for a day-long deep dive into what's working, where there are still gaps, and starting to brainstorm ways to fill those gaps at the plant, farm, and vessel level. And then we continued those conversations with retailers on the sidelines of our Responsible Seafood Summit in Scotland. And then we've had virtual convenings, and that's where we landed on the work streams.
So can you talk a little bit about the impact so far? I know that there's a lot of work that's still to be done, but what have you been seeing as far as impacts or hope to see?
Yeah, I think it's more hope to see in terms of impacts, because this first set of work was around identifying what we should actually be doing. So I've been particularly buoyed by the amount of interest and engagement we've had from retailers. And as we've started developing the social KPIs, we've had really valuable input from NGOs. And then we've also had quite a bit of interest from producers as we're beginning to try to get pilots going. So I've been very pleased with that.
So with all of that in mind, and especially keeping in mind that we're still at the beginning stages of this probably very long process of really getting all of these ideas into motion, but what is next for this process of involving these different organizations and starting to put some of these concepts into work?
Yeah, so we are excited that we have a first pilot, a first facility that wants to pilot these. So we have developed the social KPIs. We've vetted them with a number of NGOs. We've gotten input from producers. And then we'll be working with a third-party anonymous worker survey provider who's already had a great deal of experience conducting anonymous worker surveys. So we're quite excited to begin piloting that to begin to get the data to see what we can learn from these two additional data sources.
That's amazing. And if there are listeners out there hearing this episode, what's the best way for them to get involved if they're interested in participating in some of this work?
They can feel free to email me. My email address is amy.mcgann@globalseafood.org. Or if they connect through the podcast, I'm sure you can pass that information along.
Absolutely. And we'll put that in the show notes, so it'll be really easy for our listeners to have that information handy. Well, thank you again, Amy, for taking the time to kind of give us that bird's eye view. As everyone can see, there's a lot more work that will take place in the future, and we look forward to finding what those results are.
Great. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much, Amy.
Thanks, Amy.
Bye.
David, thanks for joining Maddie and I on the Aquademia podcast.
Happy to be here.
We've never actually had you on the podcast before, which is so shocking to me for many reasons. One, because we talk to you every day in the office. Mm-hmm. And two, because you are such a great public persona that it's shocking we haven't had you on the show yet. So welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much. You know, I say for better or for worse, I've been put on the GSA speaking circuit. So, you know, it's needed to happen.
Yeah, once you do one and you succeed at it, which you did, now you're everywhere.
You're locked in.
Yeah, it's a sentence.
You're locked
sure.
in.
Yes.
I'm sure some of our audience members are going to say, the name sounds familiar. Oh, but the voice is even more familiar. Maddie and I get that a lot. So, David, I want to kick things off with questions about you. So, introduce yourself and tell us about your role within GSA.
Sure. Yeah, so something I've said many times before, but I'm the manager of standards oversight for Global Seafood Alliance, which broadly means I am responsible for, I like to say, maintaining the health and wellness of all of the BAP and BSP standards. So the main part of that is to guide development and updates of all standards that we execute in the marketplace, but there's quite a bit that goes on behind the scenes in that regard in terms of, you know, talking about standards, like I do quite a bit, and you know, working with various outside groups and stakeholders on issues and special projects, and kind of thinking forward about where we're headed in the marketplace from an assurance standpoint, all of that stuff. So yeah, on paper, create standards, you know, but a lot, you know, anything that relates to kind of, you know, what's within the assurances that we do here. So
yeah, I like what you said about a lot of your role is forward thinking. I feel like that's the main crux of your job, and that's a great segue into our first question here, because a lot of the work that you've been doing over the last probably like 2 years at this point has been preparing for this new issue of our seafood processing standard, which will be the Seafood Processing Standard 6.0, or SPS 6.0 as we commonly refer to it. So can you just give us a brief overview of SPS 6.0 is for our listeners that might not be familiar with SPS at all?
Yeah, for sure. SPS in general as a concept is really kind of the foundation of our certification program. So any product that wants to go out into the marketplace and have a BAP or BSP logo on a package has to be going through an SPS certified processor, and then, you know, linking your certifications to farms and hatcheries and feed mills and vessels and whatnot throughout. Yes, creates the program, but we sort of start at the end almost with that processor step. So it's a really critical link in our program, and it leverages not just those sustainability elements that a lot of you know, certification programs are looking into, but it really reinforces the food safety and responsible processing side of things too. So it's not just an assurance leverage from a, you know, so human rights and social responsibility standpoint, but it also is that really critical food safety assurance that is necessary for, you know, pretty much all global marketplaces at this point too. So that's it in a, you know, at its base. But what SPS 6.0 to me sort of symbolizes is this transition that we've had over the last 4 or 5 years now from GAA to GSA as well. And so we've historically lived in the world of aquaculture, and with GSA and the rebrand there, expanding our assurance platform into wild capture offerings as well. And so getting the processing standard fit for purpose for the wild capture sector is obviously a critical step to kind of meet that objective. So you know, it's been a long process. It's taken multiple villages, I would say, to develop, but I think 6.0 really does kind of reflect a more holistic seafood industry approach to processing and, you know, responsible assurances through the supply chain, and not just thinking about it through the original sort of aquaculture lens.
Yeah, it seems like it's a big step from the last version of SPS, where this version has so many different components. It's a lot more inclusive of new developments and innovations that have come throughout the seafood processing process.
Yeah.
For lack of a better word.
For sure. And like, I think this sounds bad, but it's not. I think this version is a lot more engineered in a good way. And we're using this term we call a modular design here. So it's these different aspects of the standard that you kind of not opt into, but get forced into based on the operations of your facility and things. And so it's a lot smarter and a lot more streamlined to the realities on the ground, whatever those may be. So, it took a lot of time and effort to kind of think about how to build that structure and make it a little bit more compartmentalized in ways. But yeah, I'd say a great success in the end, though.
I do want to talk a little bit more about that modular approach, because that is what makes this so unique. And I do think we may have some listeners that are going to be really intrigued and end up following up after this episode goes out to learn more about this. So could you just retouch on why we decided to go with a modular approach, and what does that mean and what its value is?
Yeah, for sure. So when we talk about modular, I think the best visual description we give is a bicycle wheel.
Yep.
So the center of that bicycle, there's your spoke and axle, your hub and hub. So there's this hub of the wheel in the center, and then every spoke that goes out would be considered kind of the module. So that central hub is mandatory no matter what you do. And what we define that as is the elements of seafood processing or responsible seafood processing that would need to be demonstrated at any facility, regardless of where in the world you are, what you're doing, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
A lot of that is related to food safety. There's some, a lot of the human rights element kind of lives tangential to that and things as well. But then there are a large number of elements of responsible processing that may or may not apply to various types of facilities. Certain places, for example, will work directly with their local government to put their wastewater directly into, a city discharge. Other ones are discharging into natural water bodies and things like that. Just as that example, it automatically creates a very different expectation around your water quality management. Yep. So rather than making a facility that has a good contractual agreement with their city's wastewater, providers or managers, go through a bunch of audit clauses around my wastewater treatment, you kind of defer to the section of the module that says I have that type of waste management system. And so, that's one small example. There are things related to some geographic limitations based on if these remote wild processors that we had historically not really been super engaged with, and now that we're working more closely with, learning what are the limitations of these operations that are serving these more remote fisheries in the world, and what are the needs there as well from a responsible processing standpoint. So that exists. And then additionally, a number of modules that sort of come in and out of scope based on, again, your wild versus farmed. So, the origination of the product too. So that can often make a difference as well. So, again, there's a ton of examples within there, but I think the main point is trying to eliminate waste within the audit to make this a little bit more facility friendly. So
I'm sure we could do a whole episode on this. My next question for you, which is, what does the process look like of updating this standard? As you've said, it's taken many villages to get this to where it is today. So I'm curious if you can give us a peek behind the curtain into how the standard has gone through this process of being updated and getting to where it is today to be ready to be audited against.
Yeah, for sure. And try my best not to get too far into the weeds on this one too. You're loaded questions, Maddie. But so we have a formal written process of how we develop standards. That's, anyone can go and look at that. I think the important thing to note here is when we develop standards that have that .0 at the end of them, that's what we're kind of defining as these major updates. So we'll put minor updates into standards over the course of their life, which is roughly 4 to 5 years usually. And, you know, a 2.1, for example, might be 1 or 2 clauses being updated for necessary reasons.
Right.
These .0s represent kind of a full rinse and repeat of the development process. We bring on a new technical committee chair, we bring on a new technical committee, and you are reviewing the entire standard up and down for applicability with the opportunity to kind of recreate a whole new standard. So that .0 process is a multi-year effort that really is from the ground up and brings in a lot of different stakeholders. So SPS 6.0 got, you know, obviously that full redesign treatment and has been through multiple stages of technical committee development and then rounds of approval with our standards oversight committee and board of directors. And we are now currently in what we call the 12-month implementation phase, where the standard is available to the, for application and certification, but it is not yet mandatory until November of this year.
And those technical committees and the standard oversight committee, those are all third party, right? Like they're not people here at Global Seafood Alliance.
Yeah, so these are committees of experts that we bring in from around the world that have understanding of whatever standard we're talking about here. So for this, it was seafood processing experts, so people with backgrounds in food safety, social responsibility, you know, traceability and supply chains, a lot of, you know, various things. And then if you go look at maybe a salmon farm standard, which is another major revision we've been working on, you know, that's more kind of farming experts and things like that. So you get different, you know, different types of people depending on the standard that you work on. Yes.
So it's especially with a .0 standard, we're talking about that major overhaul, which takes a lot of time, a lot of experts, a lot of back and forth. Were there any key moments or challenges that shaped the way that this standard was developed?
Plenty of challenges. I mean, you know, never without. I mean, I think humbly, I think the reconciliation of this wild capture fold-in is probably the biggest challenge. And, you know, my background before coming to GSA was in kind of the management aspect of fisheries, so working in a government role, both for wild capture and aquaculture. But I think we admit coming into this, you know, there was not as much kind of on the ground wild capture expertise as this built out. So as we brought in additional expertise and third party groups and things like that, there were definitely some moments of reflection and realizing that there were certain ways that SPS had operated in the past that probably weren't going to be fit for purpose in the future. So, you know, as this thing expanded, there were definitely a lot of learnings and, you know, hiccups, but that's kind of the point of the process too.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah,
Right.
Par for the course. So you mentioned that right now we're in this 6-month implementation period where it's available, but it's not mandatory. So what is next after we hit November 2025? What happens then?
Yeah, so that at the end of the 12-month implementation period, we kind of flip the switch. And at that point, SPS 6.0 will be the only processing standard that we operate. So SPS 5.1 is still available. And then as of November, it will no longer be available. So part of our process over these 12 months is, you know, offering pilot audits to any facilities that would be interested to get, you know, accustomed to the new certification or new standard and the process around that. Additionally, working with some of these external groups that we use for recognition purposes. So these external benchmark tools that we use to help kind of bolster our program. So
Right.
Global Food Safety Initiative, GFSI, is a really significant one in the processing space. So working very closely with them over this year to kind of figure out the most efficient pathway towards benchmark recognition for the new standard as well.
So if there are any facilities out there that would be interested in piloting, what's the best way for them to get involved?
So it's kind of a handheld process from the pilot aspect. So anyone who's really interested kind of comes directly to GSA and presents that interest, and we can link any facility up with the appropriate certification body and auditors around the world, and kind of go from there. So as it's in this implementation period, it works through the formal certification process, but it is kind of being initiated through GSA at this time. So I think we are actively having conversations with anyone that is, coming to the door with us and interested.
And we've done outreach on this specific standard because it's so important and there's so many things that have changed. We conducted a webinar not that long ago that we will link to in the show notes. David, is there anything else, whether it's a educational piece that I can't think of off the top of my head that we should link, or is there any other specific information that you want to get out there on SPS 6.0 before we adjourn this episode?
I think we've put a lot of good information out there as it is. I think, the standard itself is, on the website. I think the process here is, and I think everything we want mentioned within SPS is probably in SPS at this point too. So we're
out there.
Yeah, so we're here for questions. I think it's been moving forward. I think November will be an exciting kind of changeover for us, but I think in a combination of working with certification bodies and getting the right technology in place, we'll be kind of set up for a pretty exciting transition here. Excellent.
Well, David, thank you so much for coming on and kind of walking through a deeper dive than that bird's eye view on SPS 6.0. I think we live it. You live it more than Maddie and I. We're obviously fully aware of what's happening because we work here. But again, any of our listeners that want to learn more, if found this intriguing, you can visit our website, check out the show notes. There's going to be useful links there. That's it. So David, thanks again.
No, thanks so much. And, thanks for having me on Aquademia finally too, Justin. I appreciate it.
Well, we're glad to have you. We'll probably have you on again, actually, because there are more things that we want to spend more than 15 minutes
I look forward to it.
And we know you can chat. So thanks, David.
Thank you.
Folks, that was our conversations with David Dietz, Kyle Harrison, and Amy McGann. Huge shout out to the amazing work that those three are doing within program integrity. I want to remind everyone that you can contact Maddie or myself via our online form located at globalseafood.org/podcast, or you can find us on social on X at Aquademia Pod. If you're not following us already, go ahead and find that handle and click that follow button.
And if you enjoyed this episode, then you won't want to miss another one, so be sure that you subscribe to Aquademia on whichever podcast platform is yours.
Ciao.
Bye.